I'm summarizing all of One Piece so you don't have to watch 1165 episodes. Yeah! But don't worry, I got you. Today we're going to be taking a look at Arlong Park. Subscribe. The story picks up right after they leave the Baratier, with Luffy, Yosaku, and Sanji crammed into a small boat out on the open seas. They're on a mission to get Nami back so they can finally head for the Grand Line. But Yosaku drops a serious warning. Luffy doesn't really know what the Grand Line is like, and Nami is heading straight towards one seriously scary guy. That's when Yosaku shares some key One Piece lore. He explains why the Grand Line is nicknamed the Pirate's Graveyard, and it's because it's ruled by three massive powers. One of them is the 7 Warlords of the Sea, which are 7 pirate captains that the world government officially recognizes. The government lets them raid the seas as long as they hand over a cut of their loot. And guess what? Dracula Mihawk, or Hawkeye Mihawk, the one that Zoro fought at Baratier, is one of those warlords. Luffy is shocked to hear it, realizing that there are 6 more pirates out there just as dangerous. Yosaku goes on to mention another warlord, Jinbei, the leader of the Fishman Pirates. By becoming a warlord, Jinbei was able to release a real terror in the East Blue, and now their path is leading straight to Arlong Park, where Arlong, a fierce fishman who used to be Jinbei's equal, is waiting. Sanji turns to Yosaku with a question. Why is he so sure that Nami is heading straight for Arlong Park? Yosaku explains that it all comes down to some telling moments back at the Baratier. Nami had been staring at the Arlong poster in a really strange, intense way, and the second Arlong's name came up in conversation, she suddenly stole their boat and took off without a word. Those little clues painted a pretty clear picture for Yosaku, and now the crew realizes just how personal this situation is for Nami. Now, let's take a quick second to truly appreciate Oda's incredible foresight. While talking about the 7 warlords, we get Jinbei's name dropped, you know, the leader of the Fishman Pirates, yada yada, but he is going to play a huge role in the future story of One Piece. And in addition, during this sequence, we also hear about Fishman Islands, and it's truly amazing how Oda is able to plant these seeds so early onto the story, long before we actually meet the characters or visit those places. So just keep Jinbei in the back of your mind. He's fairly important. We cut over to Arlong Park, where a shady meeting is going down between the Arlong Pirates and a Marine captain named Nezumi. And you can pretty much forget about Nezumi after this arc because he doesn't really play a big role later. Here we get our first real look at Sawtooth Arlong, the captain of the Arlong Pirates, and we immediately see the sketchy dynamic he has with the crooked Navy officer. We also meet more of Arlong's crew, especially his first mate Hachi, also called Hachan, and if you're trying to remember the Arlong Pirates who matter for the long haul, definitely keep Arlong and Hachi in mind. Over at the East Gate, Nami finally arrives at Arlong Park. She's acting pretty different from the Nami we've seen so far, you know, more serious and guarded. She links up with Arlong's crew, and that's when we get the big reveal. Nami is actually an officer in the Arlong Pirates, complete with their Jolly Roger tattoo. Meanwhile, Johnny, Zoro, and Usopp are making their way towards the island. The 3 of them spot the merry-go right away and make a quick break for it. After some fun, lighthearted back and forth, they reach the dock only to run straight into a group of fishmen. In classic slapstick style, Johnny and Usopp immediately jump ship, leaving Zoro to handle the fishmen on his own. Johnny and Usopp make it to shore and discover the ruins of Gosa Village, completely devastated. Johnny points out that the fishmen are said to have 10 times the strength of humans, giving them a real taste of the kind of power waiting on the Grand Line. More fishmen catch up, so Usopp makes a run for it and bumps into 2 locals, Nojiko and Chabo. And you can go ahead and forget about Chabo after this. He doesn't really play a big role later. But Nojiko is definitely worth remembering. She's introduced as a woman from Cocoa Village, so keep her in the back of your mind because she'll become important in this arc. Trying to protect the woman and child, Usopp summons his courage and stands his ground against the fishmen, only to get promptly knocked out by Nojiko herself. She has a strict rule against touching fishmen, knowing it would mean death. We then shift to the outskirts of Cocoa Village at a peaceful tangerine farm, where Usopp wakes up inside of Nojiko's house. She explains that that she saved him because laying a finger on a fishman would get him killed. It turns out that the young boy Chabo was also gearing up to fight the fishman to save his father, and he mentions running into Nami earlier, which clearly catches Nojiko's attention. Nojiko snaps at the kid with some harsh words, sending him on his way, and she might come off as rude at first, but it's clear that she has a genuinely tender heart underneath. Once he's gone, Usopp asks about a woman named Nami, and Nojiko drops the truth. Nami is a part of Arlong's crew, and this is the very house where she grew up, because Nami is her stepsister. Meanwhile, back at Arlong Park, Zoro has been captured and is being taken to meet Arlong himself. The story continues back at Nojiko's house, where Usopp and Nojiko sit down and talk about Nami's past. Nami was an orphan, and the two of them grew up together in that very house. Long ago, the three of them lived happily in Koko Village, raised by someone who meant the world to them, but things clearly changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Usopp is confused and asks why someone like Nami would ever join Arlong's crew, and Nojiko looks just as fed up with the whole situation. She turns the question back on him, wondering why he's so determined to find Nami in the first place. Usopp gets visibly upset as he recalls all of the good times they shared on the ship, which catches Nojiko's attention. Frustrated, he tells her that right now he just wants to locate their ship, which happens to be right outside of the house, but more than that, he has a mission to rescue Zoro since he left him behind earlier. We cut over to Arlong Park, where Zoro is already face to face with Arlong. The meeting gets off to a rocky start right away. Arlong quickly responds by showing off the superiority of fishmen. During the tense exchange, Nami is there watching. Zoro decides to test her true loyalties by jumping straight into the water with his hands and feet tied. Nami can't ignore it and saves him, and Zoro immediately realizes she's not nearly as cold-blooded as she's pretending to be. Nami plays it off with feigned ignorance and lands a solid gut punch on him. They decide to throw Zoro in jail for the time being. Just then, word comes in that Usopp has been spotted in Koko Village, and it turns out Arlong already has plans headed that way. The story cuts over to Koko Village, where we get our first introduction to Genzo, a local with a body covered in scars and a signature pinwheel hat. Arlong then arrives to collect the monthly payment from the town. Usopp and Nojiko watch from the sidelines as Nojiko explains the harsh reality to him. The villagers have to pay a monthly fee to the Arlong pirates, and in return, the fishmen agree not to pillage their homes or slaughter them. That's Arlong's policy. Humans are basically dirt to them. If even one person in the village can't pay up, the whole place gets crushed. Just like what happened to Gosa. This gives us a clearer picture of how that village ended up in ruins. Just then, we cut back to Nami at Arlong Park. She makes her move, breaking into Zoro's cell and cutting him free. We then cut back to Nojiko and Usopp watching the tense situation unfold between Arlong and Genzo. Things are heating up fast. Nezumi tries to step in, but Arlong immediately lays down his twisted version of the law, threatening to wipe out the entire village if anyone dares to touch a fishman. Genzo works to calm the crowd, reminding them that if violence breaks out now, the last 8 years of endurance will have been for nothing. He urges them to remember their vow, to fight by enduring, by simply living on. But Arlong retaliates right away, making a brutal example out of Genzo for speaking out of turn. It really drives home the superiority complex that Arlong and his crew have over humans. Just as Arlong is about to finish the job on Genzo, Usopp jumps in and proudly announces himself as Captain Usopp, and he's here to save the day. Some of the fishmen quickly recognize him as the stranger who got away earlier. Arlong is clearly not impressed by the performance and casually picks up the entire building Usopp is standing on, tossing it aside. In true Usopp fashion, he makes a dramatic escape. Once the commotion settles down in Koko Village, Nami returns and gets the cold shoulder from most of the villagers, except for Nojiko and Genzo. We cut to a quiet cliffside where Nami and Nojiko stand together in front of a grave. Nami shares that she only has 7 million berries to go towards the bargain she struck with Arlong years ago. 100 million berries to buy the village's freedom from him. Back at Arlong Park, it turns out Zoro stuck around after being freed from the cell, and he's taken out every fishman in the place. The story continues just outside the gates of Arlong Park, where we see Hachi casually fishing, which catches Zoro's attention, leading to a fun and awkward exchange. Hachi is completely clueless that all of his comrades inside have already been taken out, and he ends up unknowingly chatting and making friends with the very enemy responsible. We cut back to Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp on their boat, boat as they run into a massive sea king named Momu, who's part of the Arlong pirates. The creature proves no match for Luffy and Sanji, who quickly beat it and toss it aside. Back with Hachi, he drops Zoro off after their friendly encounter as Zoro heads out to find Usopp. Arlong returns to Arlong Park at the same time and discovers the total havoc that Zoro left behind. One of the fishmen immediately points the finger at Zoro for the mess, and at that point, another crew member drags in a captured Usopp. As the Arlong pirates try to piece together what happened, they start questioning Nami's loyalty. Just then, Nami shows up and shuts down the suspicions by threatening to kill Usopp herself. Meanwhile, Zoro catches wind that Usopp has been taken to Arlong Park, and over on the water, Luffy and the crew have successfully tamed the giant sea cow and are now riding it straight towards Arlong Park. Back to Arlong Park, where Usopp keeps spinning his wild tales, desperately trying to talk his way out, but the fishmen aren't buying it that easily. One of them notices Nami looking a little nervous, so she steps in to prove her loyalty. A fishman takes the chance to berate her for some of her recent decisions, but Nami stays calm and replies that the only thing she truly believes in is money. She calls Luffy stupid for trusting her so easily. Just then, Hachi arrives and sees the damage to Arlong Park, and in a hilarious moment, he blurts out that he actually helped Zoro just a short while ago. Arlong decides that he doesn't need to hunt Zoro down. He's confident that the swordsman will show up on his own soon enough. Nami takes control of the situation and beats Usopp down to the floor. She explains that Luffy and the crew are about to destroy 8 years of her hard work, so she'll be the one to finish them off. Usopp tries to defend himself with more tricks, but Nami sees right through them and handles him quickly, putting an end to our beloved Captain Usopp. Just outside the gates, Johnny witnesses the whole brutal scene. Nami tosses Usopp's body into the water, which finally clears away any remaining suspicion the fishmen had about her. One of them tries to push her further, but Nami makes it clear that the only thing she cares about is buying back the village. Arlong agrees, saying he would never break a promise. That's just the kind of fishman he is. Outside of the gate, Johnny gains a new sense of determination to find Zoro and tell him what he just saw. We cut to the outside of Arlong Park where Luffy is speeding towards the entrance on the sea cow. At the same time, Zoro is running full speed towards the park, and their paths cross in the worst way possible. The crew crashes into the shore, sending their boat flying across the island and landing right on Zoro. The crew reunites with Zoro right away, and he tells them he knows where Usopp is, and they need to get him back from Arlong fast. Then Johnny shows up and delivers the shocking news. Usopp was killed by Nami, and the whole crew reacts with total disbelief. The story cuts back to the west end of Koko Village. Nojiko, Genzo, and some of the other villagers are checking out a giant crater in the ground left behind from Luffy's earlier crash landing. Just off the horizon, they spot a Navy ship heading straight for Arlong Park, and this whole sequence really drives home the overwhelming strength of the fishmen, especially Arlong. We also get proper introductions to 2 more of his officers, Kurobe and Chu, though they remain largely unimportant to the One Piece story as a whole. However, I guess it is fairly important to mention that Kurobe over here uses fishman karate. It's not really that important, but you hear about it later. On the Navy side, we meet this Commodore from Navy Base 77, and you can go ahead and forget about him after this. He doesn't play a bigger role in the story either. The Arlong pirates make quick work of the Navy ship, completely destroying it. The real point of this scene is just to show how hopeless the situation feels for Koko Village, as the villagers stand by helplessly and watch the Navy get wiped out. Back with Luffy and the group, it's clear Luffy isn't buying what Johnny said about Nami. Things start heating up between Johnny and Luffy when Nami suddenly shows up and steps right into their conversation. She arrived with the clear intention of burning every single bridge between her and Luffy's crew, ending all ties once and for all. Johnny points right at her and testifies to what he witnessed back at Arlong Park, and Nami calmly agrees with his account. Zoro doesn't hesitate. He stands on business, drawing his sword and moving to attack. Sanji quickly intervenes, stopping him and asking what kind of swordsman attacks a young lady. Zoro fires back, telling him to stay out of it, you love-struck fool. This moment marks the first of many times that we're going to see Zoro and Sanji clash in their classic hateful brotherly rivalry. Unfazed, Nami says her piece and walks away. Luffy collapses in boredom and decides to take a nap instead, saying that he doesn't want to leave the island and that the fishmen don't scare him one bit. Johnny and Yusaku choose to depart from the group as well, since they have no desire to confront Arlong and decide that it's time to take their leave. Then, the impossible happens. We cut to Usopp, drenched in water, walking through the village while replaying everything in his head. It turns out that he didn't actually die. Nami had stabbed her own hand to avoid raising suspicion. He realizes that he needs to find Zoro right away. Back with Luffy and the crew, they're still debating whether Nami really killed Usopp, and just as Zoro and Sanji are about to throw down again, Usopp suddenly gets caught right in between them, reuniting the group in perfect comedic fashion. Over at the Tangerine Farm, Nojiko walks into her home and finds Nami there, clearly frustrated. Nojiko already knows it's about Luffy's crew, and after Nami shares some of her story, she falls asleep, and Nojiko is actually surprised by the tales of shipmates and friends, words that seem to hurt Nami more than anything. Back with Luffy and the crew, Usopp explains that he's certain Nami saved his life, and that she must have some deeper motive for staying with the fishmen. Just then, Nojiko arrives and warns them that they'll never defeat Arlong. She offers to explain everything, but insists that they need to leave the island. The story continues with Luffy completely uninterested in Nojiko's storytelling efforts. He gently walks away while the rest of the group decides to stick around and hear what Nojiko has to say. We cut back to Nami as she wakes up from her nap and spots a basket of tangerines, and that simple sight takes us straight into a flashback 8 years earlier, with Nami as a young child. Genzo catches her stealing and brings her home, banging on the door for Bellamere, and that's when we officially meet Bellamere, Nami and Nojiko's foster mother. She uses some clever tricks to shoo Genzo away, but even though she helps Nami out of trouble, she makes it clear that she doesn't approve of the stealing. It shows her loving but stern side as a mother. We see that even as a kid, Nami was already talented at drawing detailed land maps and ocean charts, hinting at her early passion for navigation. She proudly declares that one day she'll sail every sea and create a map of the entire world. The three of them sit down for dinner, but like any kids at the table, Nami and Nojiko quickly start arguing, and it escalates when Nami snaps that they're not even real sisters and they're not even related by blood. Well, that catches Bellamere's attention, and she immediately disciplines Nami firmly. The argument turns heavy, ending with Nami shouting that she wished rich people had found her instead, and that Bellamere isn't her real mother. Bellamere, keeping her composure, tells her to go ahead and do whatever she wants. If she hates this home so much, she can leave. Nami storms out of the door right away, but Bellamere then turns to Nojiko, apologizes for losing her cool, and asks her to bring Nami back for dinner. We shift to Genzo looking after Nami in the village, and through their talk he shares Bellamere's past. She once ran away, returned as a tough sailor, and during a terrible storm arrived with 2 babies she had rescued from a battlefield. Genzo emphasizes that the bond between Bellamere, Nami, and Nojiko runs deeper than blood. Just then, Nojiko finds Nami, but before they can head back, the Arlong pirates launch their raid on Cocoa Village, and we get a deeper look at how Arlong enslaved these people. He forces the villagers to pay a heavy monthly tribute in exchange for not destroying their homes and lives. As the fishmen finish collecting the fees, they spot smoke rising in the distance. Bellamere is at home cooking, getting ready for Nami and Nojiko to return. Arlong and his crew head straight for the house and try to force their way in, only to be met by Bellamere's tougher military side. She puts up a strong fight at first, but she's ultimately no match for Arlong and his crew. Arlong demands 100,000 berries per adult and 50,000 per child each month. Bellamere says that she only has 100,000, but that's fine. Nami and Nojiko aren't officially listed as her children, so they can slip away safely. But just as Arlong is about to leave, Bellamere stops him, and in a powerful act of love, she declares that the money is for her 2 daughters, and that single statement seals her fate. Nami and Nojiko run forward and hug Bellamere tightly one last time, but the moment is cut short as Arlong steps in. Genzo tries to fight back, but Kurobe quickly crushes his attempt. Arlong then raises his gun towards Bellamere, and in her final moments, before the shot rings out, she calls out to Nami and Nojiko, telling them that she loves them. The story continues with Nami crashing to the ground, reliving all of her cherished memories with Bellamere in those final moments. Arlong bursts into laughter, having made a brutal example out of her. He declares that any of his subjects who can't pay must die. And while raiding Bellamir's house, Hachi stumbles across Nami's detailed drawings. This catches Arlong's attention, and he sees the real value in her special talent for map making. Arlong decides to take Nami with him, prompting Genzo to rush in and try to save her. Kurobi quickly steps in and slices up Genzo, which is how he ended up with all those scars. Nami pleads with everyone not to get hurt on her behalf, and then tells them not to try helping her. Afterward, a grave has already been prepared for Bellamir, where Nojiko visits to pay her respects. Meanwhile, in the village, the locals are gearing up to launch an attack on Arlong Park. But right before they head out, Nami stands in the middle of the street and tells them not to worry. She's going to join Arlong's crew as their navigator and draw maps for them. The villagers question her in shock, and she reveals the Arlong Pirate's Jolly Roger tattoo on her arm. She explains that they gave her money to buy whatever she wants, and Nojiko tells her that this isn't the right way, but Genzo respects her choice, even as he warns her never to set foot in the village ever again. Later, Nojiko finds Nami at Bellamir's grave, and Nami shares her plan that she'll buy back the village for 100 million berries. And with strengthened resolve, she decides that she won't cry anymore and will fight this battle on her own. The story returns to the present, where Nojiko explains that Nami doesn't want anyone else to die at Arlong's hands the way that her mother did. She urges the crew not to cause Nami any more pain. To Nami, fighting alone is the only way, and the word friend is the most painful one of all. We cut back to Nami, who restates that she only needs 7 million more berries. She can feel she's getting close to the finish line. Just then, we shift to Luffy strolling through Koko Village, and he gets passed by Genzo, followed by Captain Nezumi and a group of Marines. Luffy looks intrigued, but not for the reason you'd expect. He's completely mesmerized by Genzo's pinwheel hat. Classic Luffy. The group heads straight for Nami's house. Nezumi declares that since Nami is a thief, all the money that she's stolen now belongs to the government. Nami fires back, pointing out that there are far more important things to worry about, yet they choose to ignore those atrocities and loot from one petty thief instead. After fending off some of the officers who start messing with her tangerine grove, Genzo steps in to defend Nami, and he reveals that the entire village knows what she's been doing and that they've been counting on her all this time. Nojiko arrives as well, but Nezumi quickly disregards her and focuses on the operation. He mentions the exact figure of 100 million berries, making it clear how easy it should be to find. Genzo immediately realizes that something is off. How would Nezumi know the precise amount? And this leads to the disturbing revelation that Arlong is in cahoots with Captain Nezumi and plans to break their deal. As tensions rise, the officers point their weapons at Nami's group and open fire, hitting Nojiko. Luffy witnesses the commotion and asks Nami what's going on, but she retaliates that she wants nothing to do with him. She tosses him aside and runs off towards Arlong Park. Shortly after arriving, Nami confronts Arlong about his betrayal, and he feigns ignorance while making it clear that he doesn't have to play by the rules. He could end her at any moment if he wanted. Arlong then begins to taunt Nami, casually saying it's only 100 million berries and she better start saving up again. But meanwhile, Nezumi and the Marines have already located her hidden stash of treasure. Nami runs from Arlong Park. Her mind is flooded with all of the horrors that she's endured. When she reaches Koko Village, she sees Genzo rallying the villagers for a raid on Arlong Park. Nami forces a smile and tries to reassure everyone that it's okay. She'll just start saving up again. But Genzo shuts that down with a warm, protective hug and tells her that she should leave the island. Nami refuses to let them go, pulling out a knife to stop the villagers. And with firm resolve, Genzo reaches out and grabs the blade with his bare hand, proving that they won't change their mind. The villagers march right past Nami as she collapses to her knees, clutching the tattoo that binds her to the Arlong pirates. In one of the most emotional and gut-wrenching scenes in all of One Piece, Nami takes the knife and stabs her own arm repeatedly in a desperate attempt to erase the mark. Luffy steps in and stops her from hurting herself any further, and though she tries to push him away, Nami finally turns and asks for help. Luffy then gently places his straw hat on her head and shouts at the top of his lungs, "Of course I will." And then the camera zooms out for one of the coolest shots in One Piece, revealing Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro waiting in the background, ready for Luffy's order, giving us the infamous walk to Arlong Park. We cut over to Arlong Park, where Johnny and Yosaku are guarding the gates to keep the villagers from getting hurt. Inside, the Arlong pirates are talking amongst themselves when the gates suddenly burst open. Luffy stands firm, staring them down and asking loudly, "Which one of you is Arlong?" The remainder of the arc features a long fight sequence with Luffy taking on Arlong, Zoro facing Hachi, Sanji battling Kurobi, and Usopp going up against Chu. And while these fights are full of memorable moments, for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to be breaking down every single punch or technique. Instead, I'm going to be focusing more on the actual story beats. The fight kicks off right away with Luffy asserting his dominance, and he sends Arlong flying across the park and crashing into a wall, all because he made their navigator cry. And there are a lot of extended reaction shots throughout these chapters and episodes, showing everyone on the outside watching the battle. Johnny, Yosaku, and the folks from Cocoa Village are all there, chiming in with commentary on nearly every punch thrown. It happens so often that it would take up too much time in the video, so we'll acknowledge it here and move on. During the scuffle, Arlong summons Momu the Sea King to deal with Luffy. But Luffy had already tamed him once before, so he makes quick work of the giant creature again, and in the process, Luffy plants his feet too deep into the ground, which gives Arlong the chance to rip up the entire chunk of earth Luffy is stuck in and hurl him into the water. And this sequence drags on for quite a while. Just to note it once here, Luffy stays underwater for a very long time, and there's a whole side plot where Nojiko and Genzo try to help him out. One Piece started kicking off another series of cover stories. With Buggy's timeline wrapped up, we are now shifting the focus on what happened to Kobe after we left him at the naval base. For those of you who are interested in that, I truly recommend checking out the cover story. Over the next few chapters and episodes, Zoro wraps up his fight with Hachi, Sanji finishes off his battle with Kurobi, and Usopp takes care of his matchup against Chu. The story cuts over to Nami, who's wrapping up her injuries. She makes up her mind to join the fight and runs straight towards Arlong Park. Arlong grows tired of all the chaos and decides to handle Sanji and Zoro himself. Just as he's about to finish things with Sanji, Nami arrives and confronts him, declaring that she's going to kill him. Arlong simply laughs it off and tells her that he's never going to let her go. She's going to be their cartographer forever. But of course, he's a reasonable fishman, and he'd rather she work for him out of her own free will. And to help her make that decision, he threatens to kill every human there except for her. And at any time, she can just come back and become an officer again. But after that chilling ultimatum, he asks Nami directly, "Are you my shipmate or theirs?" Surprisingly, Nami chooses the latter. She calls on them to fight and die with her, and they all respond with a huge cheer of support. Just then, Luffy finally wakes up from his long time underwater, and Sanji takes the chance to break free to rescue Luffy, while Nami and Zoro step up to take on Arlong. As Zoro is about to clash with Arlong, Usopp suddenly shows up to proudly announce that he won his fight against Chu. His arrival distracts Arlong for a moment, though Arlong stays mostly focused on Zoro. Zoro's fight with Arlong is short-lived, as the fishman quickly gains the upper hand. The most notable part about this moment is when Arlong lifts Zoro into the air and grows curious about all the bandages wrapped around him. He rips them off and sees the serious wound that Zoro received from Mihawk. Even though Arlong believes fishmen are superior, he's genuinely oppressed and almost a little bit unsettled that Zoro has been able to fight him this long while carrying such an injury. Just then, Luffy finally gets freed from underwater and makes his grand entrance by headbutting Arlong, kicking off their official fight. And this fight stretches across several chapters and episodes. We see some of Arlong's powerful techniques, like his shark darts, along with impressive displays of Luffy's battle IQ as he finds ways to defend himself and counter them. During the chaos, their battle moves into Nami's cartography room. Luffy becomes furious at the sight of the room where she's been trapped for so long. And when Arlong starts boasting about how he plans to keep using Nami in the future, Luffy snaps at the word use. He decides enough is enough and completely destroys the room, knowing that it's been her cage for the past 8 years. And in a touching moment, Nami watches from afar and quietly thanks Luffy for destroying that place. After a bit more back and forth, Luffy breaks Arlong's nose, and with one decisive stomp, Arlong is sent crashing through every floor. completely destroying Arlong Park in the process, and with it, Arlong's reign over Cocoa Village. The story wraps up with Luffy standing tall on top of the rubble. He tells Nami that she's one of them now, and the crowd cheers as Arlong Park has finally fallen. A local party pooper named Nezumi shows up and tries to seize all of the treasure, but Zoro quickly shuts that down, giving Nami a chance to get her own licks in too. The crowd isn't interested in that side plot though. It's time to celebrate. While the villagers prepare for the big party, we cut over to Nami visiting Bellamir's grave. She tells her that it took 8 years, but everyone is finally free. We then see Zoro getting patched up with Luffy standing nearby. One of the doctors asks Luffy if there's a doctor on their ship. Luffy replies that a doctor would be nice, but a musician should come first. He keeps bringing this up, so it's clear that he's pretty set on getting a musician on the crew. Back at Naval Base Unit 16, Nezumi makes a call to officially declare Luffy a criminal and an enemy of the state. He even sends a photo over to Navy HQ. The story continues as Genzo pours one out for Bellamir at her grave. Luffy stumbles upon him, leading to a touching moment where Genzo tells Luffy to make sure that he never does anything to make her unhappy. And Luffy completely understands the message. Back at the festival, Nojiko chats with Chabo to wrap up their part of the story. Nami, however, chooses a different way to celebrate. She heads out to get a new tattoo, reminiscent of the one that Nojiko has, a meaningful symbol for her. But we don't get to see it just yet. The bottles run dry as the sun rises the next morning. Everyone gathers at the Going Merry, where Johnny and Yosaku officially say their goodbyes. As bounty hunters, they have their own path to follow, but they hope to cross paths with the crew again someday. The crew waits anxiously on the ship, starting to worry that Nami might not show up, and just as doubt begins to creep in, they spot her sprinting towards them from a distance. And without saying a word, she runs straight through the crowd and jumps aboard. The crowd looks sad as they watch her go. Everyone wanted a chance to speak with Nami one last time, but she has her reasons for hurrying off. As she lifts up her shirt, she reveals that she's already pickpocketed all of them. After a quick chuckle, she tells everyone to take care, and the crowd immediately roars in playful anger while Nami just smiles and waves goodbye. Later, the group on shore sit together off to the side, still processing everything that just happened. The doctor shares the design Nami chose for her new tattoo, which was a tangerine combined with a pinwheel, symbols that beautifully tie back to the people who cared for her all this time. Arlong Park closes with a quiet, emotional shot of Bellamir's grave. The pinwheel spins gently in the breeze as the Going Merry sails off into the horizon. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Before you go, I do want to leave you with a few questions for you to keep in the back of your mind as you continue through the story of One Piece. Question number 1, who is Jinbei? Question number 2, why does Arlong hate humans so much? Question number 3, what's the importance of Nezumi sending Luffy's photo to Navy HQ? Question number 4, we get introduced to the concept of the big 3 powers that rule the Grand Line. So my question for you is, we know who the 7 warlords are, but who are the other 2 big powers? But yeah, I think that's everything that I got for you guys in this video. And real quick, if you've missed any of my recap videos of One Piece, feel free to hit the link and check it out. And if you're one of those people who did enjoy my videos, but you do want to move over to the story, you can start off the manga starting at chapter 96, or if you're wanting to get into the anime, you can start at episode 45. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a future upload, and I will see you in the next video. You still here?